Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Hello, Debbie. Welcome to the Widowhood.
Thank you so much, Tina. I'm so happy to be here.
I am glad to have you here, and I cannot not say something about these glasses that you have on. They're just so jazzy. Tell us about those.
Thank you. Yes, they are actually like my favorite thing. I discovered them almost 2 years ago now. They're called Pair Eyewear, and you buy the frames from them online. And I have progressives, so it's not like you can't have a prescription. I have a prescription.
Nice.
And then they sell you all different toppers or different designs that just snap onto the glasses. So it's like an accessory, a different accessory that I get to pick out every day, just like when you pick out your jewelry or whatever else. I'm like, oh, and what glasses am I going to wear today?
So how many toppers do you have?
Oh, boy.
Ish.
Well, maybe like 50.
But I mean, just like fingernail polish and everything else we change. So you get to have something that actually goes with your outfit. So I like that.
Thank you. As a matter of fact, I was just thinking today, boy, I haven't bought myself anything new in a while. I must be due.
Time for some toppers.
That's it.
I mean, there are different shades of purple. There's different, like the designs and everything else. So it sounds like it's quite an array. So thank you for sharing that with us.
No, thanks.
So that is your favorite thing. Where's your favorite place to go in the world? Or if you had a favorite vacation you like to take, where would it be?
To any beach.
Any beach.
Any beach, yep. I grew up near the beach. I mean, not right on the beach, but probably about 10, 15-minute drive with no traffic from the beach. And it's just my happy place. You know, just that smell, just looking at the water and the sand, it just, it does it for me. So it's hard to be unhappy, you know, at a beach for me.
Thank you. And I think it's really important for everybody to find what their place is, because there's something about when you're at that place that you get refilled. You have a sense of peace there. And it can be maybe your sunroom in your house. It can maybe be a walk with a pet, but knowing what it is that fulfills you and revitalize you, because one thing we'll know about being in the widowhood, it can get draining. And you need to find that place that you can restore yourself.
You know, let me share something. As you say that, it reminded me of something, and we'll get into it. But my husband was sick for a long time, and I was a caregiver for a very long time. And, you know, money was an issue. And so we actually, our house was brand new when we moved into it. It's now 25 years old, and nothing has been updated. And, you know, time and life and all of that. And in my bedroom, my husband had actually fallen and pretty much broken his nose. And there was blood all over the carpet that wasn't cleaned. There was, it was just, let's just say that I would go into my bedroom and I hated it there.
Yes.
And my cousin one day said to me, it doesn't matter. I don't care. Some way or another, we have to make this a safe place. We have to make this your haven, somewhere that you can walk into to escape everything that's going on outside of these walls and just feel at peace and happy in that space. And I had never really given consideration to, and it doesn't have to be like, in my case, I did wind up redoing my whole bedroom. And it's amazing now, but it doesn't even have to be like that. Just, I notice if you just move your furniture around or clean up a corner that you never had, like just, I never had paid attention to how much our physical space affects our mental outlook.
Thank you for sharing that. And since you've mentioned your husband, his name, if you would, please.
His name was Gary.
Gary. And thank you for mentioning. I'm going to flow with the conversation versus the way I was going to approach it. In you mentioning about how you changed your bedroom, my son went into the military in October. November, my husband relocated to Virginia because we were trying to find a job there. Then that was 2016. Alexander went to the military in October. Mark relocated to Virginia. In March 2017, Mark passed. And then May of 2017, my daughter left to go into the military. 2,600 square foot house, 1.75 acres. The children grew up there. It was the bustling, hustling situation. We were looking forward to them getting out of the house and being empty nesters. And life took a dramatic turn for me. And I was left in the house with everything just the way it was. I would come home from work and sit in the driveway in the garage crying with the idea of going into the house that appeared to be the same where we were, but nothing was the same. And one day I was up as the odd hours as you do, being a widow, and it was like, why am I letting it stay like this? I can choose to change it around. And it did not cost anything. I literally started moving things from one part of the house to another. What was my son's bedroom, I converted it into a guest room because a lot of people were coming to visit. And I took some sheets that he would have thought would have been too girly, put it on that bed and flipped that around. The room that was my daughter's bedroom, I broke down her bed, gave it away, and I turned it into an office and a study and a place where I did some meditation. I did spend some money in my room changing a little bit of things around, but the rest of the house literally was just taking things that was in one room, putting it someplace else because our mind has a memory. And when we continually to go back into the same space and you see that chair in that spot, and that's where they always sat when you came in the door, that can be very triggering. That can bring you illicit feelings that you really don't want to. You want to remember them, but not in such a horrific sort of kind of way. Or maybe that's where they pass. Taking that chair and putting it in a different room adjusts your mind to remember, but remember it differently because it is rotated. And I really encourage people to shift furniture around because sometimes you may stay in the same home that you were in and you're looking, go, I don't have money, I can't do this and that. Moving the furniture around from one place to another, changing out the curtains, cleaning something up, making small changes can have a huge impact on grief.
I couldn't agree more. My husband, actually, the room that I'm recording in now was a room that I turned into his bedroom. And he was down here, our bedroom is on the second floor. He was down here for a little over a year. And I don't have any relatives locally. When my husband passed, my brother was here from Cleveland, which is about a 7-hour drive from where I am. And after everything was all over, I said, you know what? Let's just do it right now. And we flipped everything back and we did exactly that. And we moved the desk that was upstairs to the desk down here. And we just changed things around and repurposed some things. And then over time, over the last year or so, I've added little teeny things, at Home Goods for $60 that just change everything. And it really does shift your mindset because, I'm still in the same house and there are a lot of memories and some memories you want,
Yes.
People always ask me, and I know this probably isn't what we're going to talk about, but one of the biggest decisions is, right? Are you going to stay there? Are you going to stay in that home? And it's such a hard decision, obviously, depending upon where you are, where your kids are, all of those kinds of things, strongly play into that. Does money, there's so many factors. But if you're not forced to leave, is it still better to leave? And when is the right time to leave? And, that would seem to be one of the first things. Are you going to stay in that big house? You're going to stay there? Whoa, it's not time to make a decision right away. let's just sit back and see how things play out.
But let's talk about that for a little bit because
Yeah.
those are very common questions and things
Yeah.
that come about in this journey of widowhood. The house or belongings or items and how do you deal with those? I know a lot of people say, don't make any choices in the first year if you don't have to. And people feel as if it's something magical about a year. But it is literally our brain has experienced trauma. So your prefrontal cortex, the brain that you are accustomed to operating with, is operating at a diminished capacity. Your amygdala in the back of your brain, you're more on fight and flight response than some of the logic. Well, you have a grief brain. You have foggy thoughts. You think that you're crystal clear, but when you literally go a bit of time and you reflect back, and like, I don't remember anything. I don't recall what happened. I don't know who did what or how that even came about when you're every person I've spoken with, when they go back and try to reflect over the first few months of their loved one passing, there's a lot of gaps in memory. And if you don't have to make major decisions, I really encourage people not to. Now, there may be a situation where they made more money, there was no life insurance, you had no means, and you're about to be financially devastated and you're needing to make a choice that's going to be for your betterment. Then obviously that's something that you have to do. But if you're in a situation that you can wait, I do encourage people to give it time because there is so much to think about. And you may I've talked to people that sold the house right away, and then about 2 years later, they regret it and they wish that they never did. Have you had interaction with people, or what would be your thoughts on that?
No, I completely agree. And everybody who asks me now, who says, I have a fairly big house and I have two sons, and one is a senior in college, and he's going to be home. He's going to graduate this May, and he plans on coming back and living at home. And then I have another son who suffers from mental illness, who's living with me, who I don't see anytime soon, won't be living with me. So it's not like I have an empty house. And fortunately, even though financially it would certainly be easier for me to be in a smaller house and more affordable, I have been able to stay here. And even though I see the financial benefits of downsizing for sure, I am still I'm not fully convinced that that's the right thing for myself and my kids at this point. So I'm staying put until my gut, and I just know that it's the right time. And I know that right now is not the right time.
Timing has a lot to do with it. For me, we were in Pennsylvania and it was cold. The snow
Yeah.
was horrific. Both of the children were out of the house. They were in the military. There was no concept of them returning to the house. So I had to really say, why would I stay in the house? Our goal was actually to relocate to Virginia. And relocating here to Virginia was a fulfillment of something that we planned on doing. So that was already something that was in place. Like Mark had found the job here and I was in the process of finding one. So the gut, the running the numbers, the logic, all of those came together. And then also, even though you don't, I think one of the other things that I found that was very interesting being a widow is the lack of accountability. Mark and I did everything together. Now I'm making these very life changing decisions and having to do them independently. I feel like I made good decisions, but I'm definitely glad that I allowed myself some time to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And in my case, it was a little bit different because my husband also suffered from mental illness. I was pretty much making the decisions, but he was still a sounding board.
Right.
And I think that is, not that he wouldn't make decisions, but he was at a point with like depression and anxiety. He didn't want to make any decisions. But at least when he was in the right frame of mind, he was at least somebody that he and I could discuss it.
That is really important. And even though it is the title of your book, it says 1 second thought.
On second thought.
On
Okay.
second thought, maybe I can. And I feel like that's something that we think about on a regular basis as a widow. How did you come up with the title?
Yes, I actually came up with the title before my husband had passed away.
Mm,
And so where it came from was the fact that for the majority of my life, anytime that any opportunity was presented, and it didn't have to be something big like, do you want to change jobs or move, or it didn't have to be something like that. It could have been something as simple as, do you want to learn how to knit? And right away I would say, no, no, I don't do that. I can't do that. That's not for me. I always had no was just the answer.
wow.
And even though maybe inside I might have been thinking, I wonder if I could do that, my knee-jerk reaction was always no. And as I got older, what I discovered was that if I just, even if I still wanted to say no, if I just waited a second more, right? And so that next second is, on second thought, well, why not? Maybe I can do that. Maybe I can learn to knit. Maybe I can, whatever that is. And when you say maybe you can, that's when you grow as a person, as opposed to doing what I had done all my life and just say no. And really saying no was because there was some type of fear there. Most likely fear of failing or looking silly or being judged or any of those things. And those are the kinds of fears that stop us from really moving forward. And I think as a widow, my goodness, how often are we faced? Because it's almost like everything is new, right? I mean,
Yes,
everything that is happening to us is new because it's a new experience because we're going through it as a widow as opposed to as, a wife.
exactly. I want to pause. And so for the podcast team, I want to do that over in the beginning instead of stumbling over my words. I don't know why I did that after looking at this book so many times. So if
Oh,
you would
okay.
make this the beginning of the conversation, I would greatly appreciate it because they do a great job editing.
Okay.
The idea of being a widow and always having to think, can I do this and can I do that? And when I looked at the name of your book, I was like, wow, how appropriate. On second thought, maybe I can. And then if you guys would just put the conversation after that. Thank you. Didn't have to do that over, but that part I want to be smoother.
Thank you.
There is so much in here. And I've made a couple of notes of things that I'd like to go over, but just for the audience, I'd like for them just understand what is spoken about in the book. If you don't mind reading some of the contents. Part one, discovering the past. In the beginning, dance class. Am I in the right family? I thought that part was hilarious. I'm not even going to go over that so much, but I was like, that was pretty interesting. Um, the dreaded belt that elicited some memories from me being 58 years old in corporal punishment, but take it what you will there with that. Always a bridesmaid, softball tryouts, Bobby, strike four. Part two, developing the transition, dad or college. Debbie, the caregiver, was born. Life after college, Joe, meeting Gary. There is some more in that section, but I'm going to move to part three, defining the present. Money, becoming the boss. Belly dancing. I thought that was an interesting title there, but it fit. Keeping an open mind, Wizard of Oz, and the end of an era. In the prologue, well, when you hear me read all that, what comes to mind for you? I know you've written it, but sometimes it may elicit something different when you hear it.
It's so funny because I haven't really looked at it in such a long time that I forgot. I forgot the titles. And you know, I think I'm proud that I was able to actually do it, to actually write and hopefully articulate the message that was my intention, which was, inspiring people that regardless of all these limiting beliefs and all these things and issues and that we develop along the way, that we always, no matter what our circumstances are, we have the power to change our lives.
Mm, thank
So
you.
I'm proud.
For someone that is thinking about writing a book, what were some lessons learned on a couple of things you would want to share with them from your experience?
Okay, so let me just say that never in my life did I ever have any desire to write a book. I considered myself a numbers girl. Math was my subject. I graduated with a degree in accounting. I had an accounting career. I was a CPA for 10 years, and now I've been an insurance agent for 30 years. None of those things equal writing. And so, as time went on, and all these crazy things, not crazy, good, mostly, tough challenges. And everyone's like, you really need to write a book. And now I'm sure that most people, you've heard that, right? And you just blow it off. And that's what I did. Yeah, sure, I need to write a book. But when I really started wanting to kind of spread my message to other women, it was like, well, how do I do that? What is
Mm,
the best way? What is the best avenue? And then I started seeing and understanding, and really thinking about the power of writing a book. But I thought, well, I don't know anything about ghostwriters. How much do they cost? Where do you find them? Because I myself, I really believed that I was not capable. And what wound up happening was I was listening to a podcast I was not a regular listener of, that podcast. And there was a woman on as a guest who helped first-time authors get their stories out there. And I thought, oh my goodness, this woman is, this was meant to be. So I contacted her after the podcast and, really liked her a lot. And she convinced me that I could do it. And she was starting a 12-week course for first-time authors to help them learn how to do this. And I was about to pull the trigger and say yes. And then out of the blue, my husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer.
mm,
And I was speaking to a therapist at the time. And I said to the therapist, well, I'm even embarrassed that I'm saying this out loud. But I'm kind of a little disappointed because I thought that he was really maybe going to do this and the timing, but obviously I'll put it off. And she said, well, I actually disagree with you. I think now is the perfect time for you to take this course. And I said, what? I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what the next weeks, months, whatever, how can I do this? What if I can't show up one week because it was a weekly online course? Or what if there's homework and I can't do it? Or and she said, who cares? Let go of that. Because, it's this desire to be the A student, to, not disappoint. And I realized, well, heck, I guess she's right, because who's going to judge me? My husband is dying, and gave me, I think, a little bit of a freedom. And the first month or so, I really struggled. I struggled with, and I think everybody's brain obviously works differently. I need to see it. I didn't understand. I'm writing these stories, but then what? What's the through line? What's the order? How is somebody going to get my message? So it took me a while, but for me, once I had that plotted out and I understood, and then once I had my titles of my stories, then I was able to very easily go back in. I shouldn't say, let me qualify that and change that. Not very easily. It was easier to go back in and write. The other thing that is just so funny now that I think about it, I had in my mind, I had to write it in the order, right? Chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. And when I learned, no, you can write it in any order, it was this amazing freedom, because then
mm.
every day when I sat down to write, I could look at the outline and say, what do I feel like talking about today? And so that was super helpful. But I think for me, for anyone who wants to do it and doesn't know where to start, for me, taking this, small group course was helpful. But I think just more the belief that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter your circumstances. It doesn't matter if you've ever had any training, because I've had, nothing. You can do it.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that's going to help someone. Let me read right here on page number 1. I have been a victim for most of my life. It became my identity. Others would listen to my tales of woe and say, "Poor Debbie." I was a victim of my circumstances. This was my belief until a few years ago, when I came to understand that everyone could call themselves a victim if that's how they chose to live. I had no idea there was an alternative. I hadn't received the memo.
Gave me the chills.
What comes to mind? What do you think of in hearing that?
I didn't even know that I was doing it. I didn't even realize I have always been an upbeat person. I was always a happy person on the outside. So I had no idea that I was viewing myself this way. And it wasn't until I really started, diving into learning more about myself that I came to that realization. And at first, it came with a lot of self-degradation, like, I can't believe that this is what I've been doing my whole life. But on the other hand, now knowing that gave me the power to change it and pay attention to how I thought, how I acted, where I made my decisions from.
Was there something that happened at that point that brought that to light, or was it a slow reckoning?
It was a slow reckoning. I mean, in the book, when I talk about my story, I kind of say it happened when I turned 50, but it wasn't like, on my 50th birthday, the heavens opened up and started singing and saying, "Oh, here, time to make a change." It was a slow realization. And I think something for me about the number 50 hit me hard, thinking, one, how could 50 years have already passed? And if this passed so quickly, how quickly are the next 50 going to go? And I, watched my father, who was disabled for the last 30 years of his life, but live with a lot of regrets. I see my mother having a lot of resentments. And I thought to myself, that's going to be me. If I don't change something right now, that's going to be me. And I don't want to get to the end of my life and say, where did it all go? And how did I waste it? Always complaining or feeling sorry for myself, and really not taking the bull by the horns and leading my own, leading my life as I wanted to. And I didn't know how I wanted it to be, by the way. I had no idea, but I just knew that I needed to take control instead of letting everything and everyone that was going on around me control my direction.
Thank you. Number 1, in the beginning, ever since I can remember, as well as prior to that, I'm guessing since birth, even though I can't say I recall. I love the little humor in the antidote. My life's theme has been my weight. Now hold on and don't roll your eyes at me. Even if weight hasn't been your life's theme, the emotions I dealt with and the lessons I've learned are universal, no matter what you struggle with. What have been some of those universal lessons?
Oh, gosh. Well, the lessons have been that it doesn't define me. I have, for a very long time, felt that just because I was overweight, I wasn't worthy.
Mm.
I wasn't lovable. I was constantly being judged. And my self-worth went up and down with the scale. And even now, even though I would hate to admit it, it still is hard to shake that. I'm a million times better than I was, and I'm at a place in my life with my weight that I honestly never thought that I could achieve, but I have. But it's still a battle. It's still a battle.
When I hear that, Debbie, thank you for sharing that. It's sort of like grief. It still exists. We kind of hold it different. It's not something you're ever over. It's just the way that we manage it is different once we identify or we work on different things. What would you say to that?
Oh my goodness, that's so true. Well, let me just share with anyone who's not looking or you can't. I've, I'd say now I'm probably 10 pounds overweight. I'm talking, I was 100+ pounds overweight. So for me, 10 pounds is practically like, I don't know what, being so skinny that I have a problem.
It's the
So,
holidays is what it's called.
yeah. So I had met a woman somewhere and she struggled with her weight, and she was like, actually, she wasn't like, she was really working with actually women who struggled with their weight on their own self-worth, not about losing weight or anything like that. And I so related to her. She just met me and she said, what are you talking about? Because I don't see that. Why would you relate? And I said, are you kidding me? And then I had to tell her, and excuse me if this word offends anyone, but my cousins who've also struggled with their weight, we use the word fat. So my feeling is once a fat girl, always a fat girl, right? Because that's who I am inside.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same exact thing with being a widow. Once you've experienced that, once you've gone through the pain and suffering of that, it never goes away. It never goes away.
And so let's talk about Gary. How did you meet him?
So I met him. I was a CPA and I was working at a small accounting firm, and I had these monthly clients that I went to, same people every month. And at this one particular location, the bookkeeper that I worked with was a woman around my mom's age who had a daughter the same age as me. And I would go and she and I would chat before we started working. And it always seemed to go back to how difficult it was to meet a good guy. And so, and she had listened, I was in love with my boss, whatever. She listened to all my stories. And one day she said to me, you see that guy out there? Yeah. Every time I talk to him, he reminds me of you. I said, really? And I had never spoken to him. He had nothing to do with like the numbers part. He was a salesman. And I said, I thought he was married. He looks married. Whatever married looks like, I thought that it was him. Anyway, that's how we met. And he was, he played hard to get just because he, at that point, was like 35 years old and had decided, he was just going to be single for the rest of his life. He was happy. He was happy in his little life. And he really wasn't looking for any complications. And I made his life oh so complicated. Oh,
Really? Just complicated, nothing else?
I guess I brought some good stuff, but very complicated. He went really from a very simple life to quite complex with all the things that I brought and our life together brought.
But it was spicy and it wasn't boring. So
no, it wasn't. Never. And we laughed a lot in the first 15 or 20 years.
And how long were you and Gary together?
30 years.
30 years. Okay, we are Am I in the Right Family? There's a lot going on here. I'm gonna read this one sentence. She just couldn't relate, and I saw how miserable I was.
She just couldn't relate, meaning my mother.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And when I read that, it wasn't just about your mother. It's about people not being able to relate to someone else. I saw when you talked about being a universal struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And even though this was a conversation about the weight, it was a relatability to other different things.
Gosh, that just reminded me of something that, as a widow, I recently went away. I'm very friendly with two of my first cousins. And we were just away on a cruise celebrating my one cousin's 60th birthday. And the whole time I watched as they checked in with their husbands, sometimes in the morning, sometimes not, but always later in the day. And if it wasn't a phone call, then during the day, it might have been a text or call you later, here's where we are kind of thing.
So it was a girls' trip, the husbands were.
A girls' trip, sorry, yes, just 3 of us. And by like close to the end of the trip, I thought, you know what? I mean, I can call my son. He couldn't care less where I was, right? I mean,
right.
I don't even think if you asked him now where I went, he would know. It's not the same. It's
It is
not the
not.
same. It's not the same as someone being interested in where you are and what's happening. And maybe you're interested, you want to say, find out what's going on with them or what's going on at home. I mean, I wanted to talk to my son to find out what was going on at home just to make sure he didn't burn the house down. But, that's different. And no matter how much my cousins think they can understand, they can't. And I'm glad they can't. And I think that applies to anything, right? I was just talking to someone else the other day, actually, just the other day, someone who doesn't have children, but she loves her nieces and her nephews, and she would do anything for them. And she would. And I don't doubt that. And I feel the same for my nieces and nephews. But when my niece was first born, before I had children, I couldn't imagine it be possible to love anyone more. And then I had my son. And the point being, until you were a parent, you can never explain what it's like. And it's the same thing with being a widow, and it's the same thing with anything else. Until we each know firsthand what it's like, you try to imagine, you sympathize, it's not anything malicious that we're doing, but we just can't get it. And I think that's what, for me, in anything that I've ever struggled with, support groups have always been where I've gotten the most support, because, I can take a breath, and everybody else understands, even if they're not going through the same specific exact thing. They get it. They get what I'm saying. They get what I'm feeling. And there's just such a power and just such a comfort in that.
It is. And the other thing that I would add to that is for us to put less pressure on the people that don't understand, to have realistic expectations. They have not traveled the road we're on. Why would we expect them to fully understand? And I think so many people on this journey of grief become so irritated with family and friends that don't know how to show up. And they get very disappointed that they weren't there. And I ask people, how did you know how to show up for anybody before your spouse passed? And often they say, well, I didn't. Do not equate your friends and family's love for you based on their inability to show up, because we're still figuring it out. We're in uncharted territory. So it's very reasonable to believe they don't know what to do. And they're actually looking for us to guide them or give them direction or tell them what we need to have done. But it can be a very frustrating and lonely place, and people isolate. And I agree with you, community, support group, connecting with at least one or two other people that have traveled the same road can be a game changer in your grief journey. And it may take going to a few support groups so you find your tribe. It may not happen on the first go around, but it's like a hairdresser. You're not going to let your hair be bad. You're going to keep going until you find the right hairdresser. You keep finding your tribe. It will make a difference.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy.
Okay, here. We're in this section, and I know a lot of life has happened in between these, but dad or college. My insecurities were all bubbling up inside of me. How would I ever be accepted in this new environment? People will take one look at me and snicker. No one would want to be friends with anyone who had a few extra pounds on her. Where would I change my clothes so that no one would see? Would other people be able to see me naked in the shower?
Yep. All those insecurities and things that were so real to worry about, not just not knowing, not just being, I consider myself a fearful person. I always have been, not just scared of the dark and monsters under my bed and those kinds of things. But like I said earlier, just scared to get out of my comfort zone, scared to do something different, try something new. And to go away to college after, so my father had a massive stroke at 46 the day after I graduated from high school. And I was a daddy's girl, and my parents had had some marital issues a few years earlier, and it became evident after my dad was sick that, my mom was only 39. And when it was clear that my father was not going to recover, he was going to survive, but he was going to be permanently disabled, I think that my mother thought to herself, and this is me, just conjecture, saying, I'm not going to do this. This isn't the life I envisioned, especially because they weren't, in the best of marriages. And so even though she did everything that was necessary to do for him, I was the one who did everything for him lovingly. And so the idea now that I was going to leave him, quote unquote, alone again, she was not deserting him and kicking him out on the street. He had to go through a lot of therapy and surgeries after that to go then into a place that I was petrified to be going to was very difficult. And in the end, I went, but I was unsuccessful.
And so unsuccessful, you returned home, didn't complete college?
I returned home. So I returned home around maybe November. And so I did not receive any credits from that first semester, but I returned home for a year and a half, and I attended a local university and just commuted, worked part-time, and then took care of my dad the rest of the time. And I decided before my junior year, I realized I'm never going to get this time back. I'm never going to have a chance to have the typical college experience. And I think my life a lot has been like that, getting nervous, what if I don't? What if, what am I missing? Maybe I've got to give it a try. And so for the last 2 years, I actually transferred to a different university that I started in. So I actually went to 3 different universities.
Okay.
But I did graduate.
That part, you graduated. CPA exam is no light matter.
Oh, that's no joke.
And so people, I think we often get stuck on where it didn't go right or where it looked like I may have failed versus the success and the saving of some money in a community college versus those 4-year institutions.
Oh, no, it wasn't a community college.
Okay, but the 2-year college it wasn't a savings at all?
It's saving because I was home and I was working part-time. Right. But it was a 4-year university.
Okay. But there's something to be said for that and saving a couple of coins in the process because education is expensive.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure.
Okay, I have 3 more tabs here.
Okay.
My Annie, that's the chapter in number 18.
I'm going to cry just hearing that.
I never got to teach her how important it was to become a strong, independent woman.
Yep. So I struggled with infertility, and like I said earlier, I have 2 sons. It took 3 in vitro fertilizations each to get them. With my younger son, it was a real long shot, and he was a complete miracle. I was 39 when I had him. I had never gotten pregnant on my own other than the in vitro fertilizations. And when he was 2, I got pregnant, and I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And I called my infertility doctor, screaming, how is this possible? This is impossible. Now at 42, I'm getting pregnant. And he said, well, it does kind of make sense because the infertility issues were basically mine. And so it was that I had prematurely aged eggs. And he said, when, as we go through menopause, our hormone balance or imbalance changes. And some of what I was lacking then kind of, has that little time where it, kicks in. And I guess that's why the change of life baby was not an uncommon thing. Anyhow, he told me, look, we'll put you on some of these meds for after you're pregnant, but Deb, chances are 5% that you're actually going to give birth to a baby. Okay, but you come back every week and we'll check it just like we did with the in vitro. And then, they do blood work and they do ultrasounds. And every week I would hold my breath for that Tuesday when we'd go back to the appointment. And every week it kept progressing appropriately until at 10 weeks, he said, well, I'll tell you, you've done it. I can't believe it. Now it's 95% that you're going to go full term and have this baby. And I just knew in my heart it was a girl. I have 2 boys. And my grandmother, that I was extremely close to, was named Anne. She had died before I got married. And I knew that this was Annie. And my OB was about 45 minutes from my house. And so I was released to the OB. And the next week I went to the OB by myself. No big deal. Pregnancy number 3. And he took me into another room after examining me to do an ultrasound and said, Deb, I'm so sorry. There's no longer a heartbeat. And, just like I couldn't understand what having a miscarriage was like. And I had a friend who had many miscarriages. And before she had children, like now, this is me not understanding. Before she had children, I thought, okay, I understand. But after she had children, I thought, well, at least you have kids, because I couldn't get pregnant. And I, like everything, now I know that's not the case. It hurts. It still hurts. And I sobbed when I wrote that. And I wasn't even going to put it in the book. That was one of 2 chapters I was not even going to put in the book. But it was devastating.
What made you decide to place it in the book?
Because I decided in the end that my whole point is to inspire and have other people relate. And I think the more points of possible connection there are, the better, even if it's something that was painful to revisit.
Thank you. And this book is very relatable.
Thank you.
And I know there's a story of Gary. There's a story of your life with him. But I wanted our listeners to understand this is a book more than the widow journey. This is a life journey that you are sharing that is relatable. And more importantly, I think it's an encouragement that we often need on this grief journey to realize life may have some hard parts in it, but we can still do it. And maybe someone can go, one second on thought, I could do this. I could maybe do this. You talk about on second thought, I did this afraid. You did this scared, but you did not stop doing it. And a lot of days we wake up in this widow journey wondering if I can do this again. To give some credence to the marriage and to life, what are some of your happiest memories of Gary?
Well, like I said, he had a great, great sense of humor. And that was always number 1 on my list. To me, a sense of humor is just so important. And I want to laugh, and I want someone who, enjoys that. And so he was a very big football fan. He was, let me just say that I've always been a sports fan too.
Okay.
But I wasn't as into football. I was more into baseball, and I used to play tennis, so that kind of thing. But he turned me into a football fan.
Oh.
And so he grew up a mile in New York, in Queens, a mile from Shea Stadium, which at the time, there's no longer Shea Stadium, but at the time that was the home of the Mets, the baseball team, and the Jets, the football team. And I was a Mets fan, and I'm from New York, and New York is filled with Yankees fans.
I'm about to say there's a big contention depending on where you're at and what that looks like, because some of them are New Jersey. It's a big mix there sometimes depending on where you're at.
Yes, yes. So, but it's always was easy to be a Yankee fan because they were always winners and Nets were always losers pretty much. And it's the same thing with the Jets. If and so we used to just suffer. So every Sunday or game day, we would get dressed in our Jets jerseys. When our kids were born, one had a picture at 5 days old in a Mets outfit and the other in a Jets outfit. And so every Sunday we would, especially when the boys were little, we would actually, this is like the VCR days, right? We would tape the game and then we would go do something. And most this winter time, right? Football, it's cold, whatever, in Northeast. So we're at a mall. We got every four of us got the Jets thing. Even our dog had a Jets collar, the whole thing. And we'd be walking and the game might be over and everyone would look at us and they go, man, can you believe that they lost that game? Or could you believe that play? And it was like, no, we didn't watch the game. We didn't watch the game. So we had created Sunday rituals and it was just just such a fun, happy day to look forward to. And he was a real foodie. And even though I had a weight problem, I wasn't. And I never learned to cook. I never wanted to cook. I was very limited in what I ate. He was just the opposite. So he would go to 3 supermarkets a week. And for me, going to 1 supermarket a month is like torture. And he loved it. So every game day, we would have, it kind of felt like we'd go through stages, but he would make us, some kind of, nothing fancy, like these amazing BLTs. And they were amazing because if it were me, I just slop the stuff on like this. I'm like, what is taking you so long? There's 3 ingredients, toast and a little mayonnaise. You have to do it just like this. Da, 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 da. And I was always like, damn, he's right. This really does taste extra good. And so just to you said, sit in his chair and I'd sit in my chair and scream at the stupid Jets who always wound up doing something wrong. But, we were in it until the last minute. Those are definitely some of the best memories.
Wow, thank you. If someone came to you for marriage advice, what would you tell them?
Oh, gosh. Ugh, that's a good question. Because just like everyone, 30 years, a heck of a lot of ups and downs, for sure. I think that you can't put your expectations of yourself onto the other person. Just because I might react one way doesn't mean that that's the way he should or will react. And that doesn't mean that it's wrong just because it's different from me. And I think it took me a while to really understand the difference and that one isn't right and one isn't wrong. They're just different.
Okay. That is definitely realizing that person has a separate identity. And that part is a lot.
No matter how frustrating.
Oh, yeah, I'm saying it slowly. Chapter 23, Becoming the Boss.
Mm.
Once again, I had no choice. My life circumstances had forced me to face my fears, and I had survived. I had done more than just survive. I thrived, teaching me that I was capable of anything. I could do hard things. I could do anything I set my mind to. I needed to give myself more credit.
Yeah, I'm about to celebrate my 30th anniversary next year as having my own insurance agency. And it was awful. I mean, really awful. I think that if Gary wasn't with me in this journey and a friend of mine who really put herself on the line to give me this opportunity, if it weren't for the two of them, I don't know if I would have toughed it out because it was very, very difficult. So many things about it were difficult. And one of the difficult things was that Gary and I started working together. that was super challenging. But in the end, everything wound up being a gift. It was the best thing that ever could have happened to me and to us as a family, but we had to persevere. It was not easy for sure. And it's now after 30 years, I know the ups and downs and it's cyclical. But like I said, I think the lesson is what I found is one, I am tougher than I thought. Pretty much anytime that we get through, and this is the perfect experience to say that realize how tough we are, because sometimes just getting up and walking outside every day is all we can do. And as the journey moves along, it's other things that we face as a widow that are all new and scary. But in the end, even now, even if you're on day 5, just looking back where you were 5 days ago, each day we're learning something about ourselves. We're doing something, we're putting one foot in front of the other, and I think that we're proving to ourselves that we are stronger than we thought we ever could be.
I would totally agree. My last quote from this book, and I say that, y'all, because she has a number 2. He was done suffering. Finally, no more pain. My Gary was at peace. And I became a widow on December 30th, 2022.
Makes me feel very emotional. Almost 2 years later. Like you said, it doesn't matter. It's like something magic happened at 1 year. Oh, it's 1 year. Okay, we're all cured. No, it just it hits you when you don't think it's going to hit you. Of course, on December 30th, I think it's going to hit me, but it hits you just in times you just don't know. You just never know what it is. And, for anyone who had to watch their spouse suffer, you go through that horrible feeling of you want the suffering to end, right? But you don't want to say, I want them to die, because you don't. But yet, what's the point of when you know what the inevitable is of prolonging that and watching this pain? It's just so hard. And then the second that they told me he's gone, I wanted him back. Like, how could I have even wished for that? How could I have even wished for that? Even though I don't feel guilty for feeling that way. I understand. I do understand. It's just so hard.
It is. And I want to say thank you, how much you shared of yourself in this book. Even in that last sentence I read, what you shared before that, and walking somebody through that. Because I would often say the other thing that we struggle with are the what ifs in this journey of widowhood. Would you mind elaborating on some of your what ifs and how you've battled those?
Well, one of the what ifs, and I don't think that I don't remember in the second book if I really talked about this, because it's pretty personal. Well, everything I wrote about is personal, so I don't want to make it sound like that. My gosh, I unleashed everything, but I guess personal, not about me, personal. Gary did suffer with anxiety and depression. And right before he was diagnosed with terminal blood cancer, he was hospitalized for depression for the first time in his life. And he came out of it like all upbeat and had a fantastic outlook. And then 6 weeks later gets a death sentence. I mean, it was just the cruelest timing. And in the beginning, he, tried to keep a positive attitude. But as soon as things started happening, he started just really slipping back into the depression and the anxiety. And he turned 65 on October 28th of 2022. And right before his birthday, I could see it was getting much, much worse, the depression. And I think the idea that it was his last birthday, whatever, I couldn't read his mind. And honestly, he was so closed off and angry that he wasn't sharing anything with me other than his anger, really. Long story short, I couldn't get him out of bed. He wasn't going to chemo. He was having chemo just to try and prolong his life. And he wasn't, doing anything. And all the doctors said to me, you've got to get him into a mental hospital. And the only way to do that, if somebody doesn't voluntarily check themselves in, is to be involuntarily committed. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. And I wound up having to call 911, and they send someone out. And he actually, even though he never would have done it, he said, get out or I'm going to punch you or something. And then they had to call the cops, and it just turned into this horrible, horrific thing. The hospitalization, it was a long, awful, awful story. And he wound up being hospitalized for over a month.
Mm.
He got out the beginning of December and he died the end of December. And I'm going to say he hated me, but I'd like to think that wasn't the case. But he was so angry because he saw this as my fault. And then when he died, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I put him through that, because it was a terrible experience. He was in 2 different places and it was just awful what happened to him. If I had only known, right? Why did I do that? Why was it necessary for me to do that? And I really, really, that's the biggest thing that I've struggled with, this guilt that I did that. And everyone just keeps reminding me there wasn't a doctor, and he had a lot of different doctors who didn't say, you got to do this. You got to do this.
Thank you, Debbie, for sharing that. I like to share something with you that when I am coaching people and we're dealing with the what ifs, and we know yesterday's lottery numbers.
Of course.
Like, we know them. It doesn't do us any good now. But when we struggle with the what ifs, we're using today's knowledge on a past situation. Just like we know yesterday's lottery numbers, we can look back at that situation and have all the answers of what could have, should have been done. But the majority of the time, we did the best that we knew how to do with the knowledge that we had. And most of the time, we meant no ill intent. We had the knowledge, we were making decisions that we thought were best. And that really is all that it is. And I think the most difficult part sometimes of this widow journey is the reality of how much we do not have control of life, our existence, and the things that we cannot change and we cannot do, and coming to peace and settling in the way things played out.
No, I appreciate that. And I do know that, with the information I had at the time, I did what I thought was right and what everyone thought was right. So,
Yeah. So if you were to speak to Debbie that day, what would you tell her now based on where you've been in life?
if I were to speak to Debbie, I'm sorry, when?
If you were to speak, if you could pick any time
Mm,
in your life and you could speak to younger you,
Younger me. Okay.
what period would you pick and what would you tell her?
I think I would pick teenage Debbie,
Okay.
and I would tell her that, just because you have thick thighs and large hips, you are, oh gosh, you just are a strong, smart, highly capable person who is worthy of love.
Are you loving Debbie?
I am.
Yeah.
I think for the first time in my life, I can honestly say that.
That is beautiful. What is the inspiration for the sprinkle effect?
So one of the things when I started taking this course about how to write a book was they said, well, you have to decide what kind of book you want to write. And I'm like, what do you mean, what kind of book? Well, a biography, a memoir, a self-help. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, why would I have ever given that any thought? And so that was one of the things when I wrote On Second Thought, Maybe I Can, was going to be, am I going to tell the stories? And then at the end, you know how sometimes in a book, they'll have a little box at the end of, this is what I learned from this period in my life. And I decided that I didn't want to do that. I wanted the reader to extrapolate for themselves what they, got from reading that chapter. But then after it was over, and the part 3 really talks about, how I have changed my life from 50 to now, which I'm 61 now. And so I didn't talk about that. So the second book came out of, okay, well, now I have to tell people what changed. What did I learn? What kind of ideas and habits have I developed in the last decade? And that's where the sprinkle effect came from, because it's a little sprinkle of this and a little sprinkle of that. And ice cream is my favorite food, but I don't like hot fudge sundaes. And I just like ice cream with rainbow sprinkles. And so sprinkles they just make me happy. And so a little sprinkle can change your life.
Nice. There are 15 different types of sprinkles here in the contents, and I want to cover 2. Actually, hold on, 3, because the introduction caught me also. Introduction, a sprinkle of possibilities. Do you feel like life is passing you by, leaving you caught on a hamster wheel without real progress? Are you unhappy with how things have turned out, perhaps facing a major life transition? 10 years ago, I would have answered yes to all these questions. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and resigned to a life that felt out of control, out of my control.
Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure. I mean, like I said, so I took care of my dad, lived 30 years from that day that he had the stroke. And I was his caregiver for 30 years. I was his person. I had to worry about his money. I had to worry about where he lived, his medical things, where I was going to go on a holiday, everything. And so he passed away when my oldest son was about 10. My oldest son was diagnosed on the autism spectrum at 2. And that, was a whole other type of caregiving. And then, of course, Gary actually had developed both physical and mental illness about 10 or 15 years before he died. So that was a whole long process as well. And so all I did was put out fires, help people, and just like I said, on that hamster wheel, okay, that to-do list, I got to do this, I got to do this. And especially like when my kids were, like 8, 9, 10, whatever, up until like high school, it was, where do they have to go? Where it was just, work and taking care of and money and just managing everything and not having a chance to breathe, not feeling in control and just feeling exhausted. I was ready to explode at any minute. Somebody could just say hello and I might start screaming at them, literally, especially my family. And I was, not paying attention to my health. I had, and it wasn't even just like the diet and exercise and all of that kind of stuff. It was my mental health. Like I just said yes. I was not going to let anyone down. I believed like I wore a red cape and I had, the S superhero. And if you needed me, I was helping you. I was volunteering to be treasurer of 3 different organizations simultaneously while I'm doing this and running my insurance agency. Like, what? What was I thinking? Like, I was making it harder on myself by not practicing the self-care habit of just say no. Just say no. It's okay. And they'll find someone else. And if they don't like you because you can't do it, oh, well, and so I was causing a lot of the problem. But that's one of the things that I, needed to really start to understand about, my part in what was going on. It wasn't just what was going on around me.
I think that is a lesson for us all to learn.
Mm.
Thank you. Chapter 8, A Sprinkle of Vision. Violet, often associated with imagination and spiritual insight. Violet is perfect for vision. Visualization is purposeful and planned. The idea is to see yourself doing the thing you want to accomplish. In your mind, you go through the steps necessary to achieve your goals.
Yeah. Athletes do this all the time. I don't know I say in the beginning of the book, I'm not a science person. All I can tell you is I know there is science behind this, that your mind doesn't know the difference of if it's happening for real or not. And so it's like muscle memory. And that's why when athletes, they envision themselves running the race, catching the football, swimming the meat, whatever it is, over and over and over again until it's kind of like you visualize it into reality. And it's different than dreaming, just sitting there dreaming, oh, I wish my life could be like this. It is something that's purposeful. And maybe it's sitting and imagining what you want your dream life to be. I mean, I remember, and I say it in another chapter, I think the one right before it, about I had gone through this course and they were like, well, what would your dream day be? And I thought, I don't know. Like, I never thought to think that. Like, okay, I would think, oh, I want to win the lottery, right? Or something like that. But that's so general. Even if I won the lottery, what would I do? What would I want that day to look like? You know? And when you really start to think about it and break it down, that's actually what started my whole process of learning about the visioning process of really having to think, well, what would I be wearing? Where would I be? What would I have for breakfast? All of that. And then reading it and visualizing exactly what that would look, taste, smell. The whole idea is to engage all your senses. That it is a really powerful tool that, I never really gave any thought of using.
I would agree. That is important, because if not, we're left with just what we see and where we're at. And it takes the ability to envision something different. Maybe it's envision the day that you don't cry anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe it's envision the day that you laugh every day that week. Maybe it's envision that I can find joy in life again and see yourself walking on the beach, being able to talk to friends, having a conversation, going roller skating. But taking the leap and giving yourself permission to not just dream, but literally see yourself in that space and say it's okay for me to continue my journey and be happy. And with that, I want to cover a sprinkle of joy. Number 15, often seen as bright, cheerful, and uplifting. Yellow symbolizes happiness, positivity, and warmth. I used to roll my eyes at the idea of a gratitude journal
Mhm.
and daily affirmations. You do a lot of eye rolling. I just caught on to that. It all seemed like fluff to me. I remember the first time I attended an online business mastermind meeting, a group where business owners share ideas and support each other. And the facilitator introduced us to tell everyone what we were grateful for before posing our questions to the group. What kind of nonsense is this? What is the point? I decided it was a leaders adding filler in order to waste time. What
Yep.
would you say now, though?
Oh gosh, I was so wrong. I was so, so wrong. And I never would have realized it because the only thing that made me realize, I thought, oh, I mean, I really did. I can remember thinking, you gotta be kidding me right now. Like, what do you want me to tell you? I'm grateful for my dog. And I am grateful for my dog. That's going to change because I tell you I'm grateful for my dog. Like, I really thought it was nonsense. And at the time, I had a business coach, And for goodness sakes, wouldn't you know, it's sitting right over there. I'm looking right at it. She sent me a gratitude journal as a gift.
Okay, get it, girl. I want to see it.
Right here. This is it. And inside, I wrote this in my book, and I actually wrote about a specific day in my entries. And so each day had 2 pages, a morning and a night. And it asked you specific questions. And so like the morning one said, what's today's focus, an affirmation for today, what I'm grateful for, what I'm excited about today, and how I'll make space for gratitude today. And every day I would scratch my head, and especially under like, what am I grateful for? I would write the same things every day, like the same general stuff. And then I realized, oh, well, maybe it's not just as big as my kids, my house, my whatever. And started really like, I just turned to this page, which was February 1st, 2022. That's what I happened to turn to. And what I'm grateful for was my online community, Gary getting up out of bed for several days, and Valentine's Day decorations, because I love Valentine's Day, because that's my favorite holiday, kind of next to Christmas. It's a close one, but Valentine's Day. And what wound up happening was, after a while, I noticed that I started noticing things that I never paid attention to ever before. And I almost scared myself and thought I was like kind of forcing it to happen, but I wasn't. I was out walking the dog, and usually I'd be on my phone, and I looked up, and I noticed how blue the sky was. Or I noticed, the trees moving in the breeze. Like, I don't want to say I'm not a nature person, but I'm not someone who appreciated anything about nature. And I thought, oh, look at that. And then it was like I was searching for something to put in my journal that was different, but it didn't come out of like a phoniness. And it's changed my life. It changed my life because I realized that, and it really helped me as a widow, because I realized no matter how bad, no matter how sorry I felt for myself or how sad I was and still am, and every day can always find something to be grateful for. And it really, really changes your outlook. It really, truly does. And so I was wrong yet again. Just another thing completely wrong about, and now I'm thinking, oh, I think I want to make my own gratitude journal for others to fill out. And I'm thinking, you've got to be kidding me. This is ridiculous. But because now it turned into something that is so powerful, and I don't use this particular journal anymore because I was having trouble fitting in, like the morning part for me was easy, but the evening I couldn't figure out. And I think I wrote about, I couldn't figure out how to do it. And that was okay. It didn't matter because it taught me the lesson I needed to learn.
Wow. Thank you. We covered a lot in this conversation. I appreciate you joining me. Did we cover everything you wanted to talk about, or is there anything that you wish we would have tapped into?
No, I think, well, one, let me say thank you so much for taking the time to read the books and to pick out just some wonderful highlights and great questions. So no, I think you have thoroughly gone through my life. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I will, if you have any questions of me, maybe anything you have of me, I'd like to give the opportunity if you had any questions.
Did you hear that? I think Yogi has some questions for you. He's saying, I got to go out. What is she doing talking on?
Well, if that,
No, I just want to say to you, I just think, the few times that we've spoken prior to this, I am so grateful for what you do, because you've created a community that's so needed, and the advice and the information that you give to all of us who are in this widowhood together. We need people like you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I was unsolicited. I will say thank you. I will let you close out this conversation. This was your podcast, and I'll let you wrap it up.
Okay, so I'll wrap it up with something else that I used to think was nonsense, which was I couldn't stand how everyone, like in yearbooks and stuff, would have like a quote that they lived by. And I couldn't understand. Even like in junior high, you have a quote that you live by at like 13, really? I don't have a quote. Well, now I have a quote, and it means something very different than I ever realized until one day I read it and thought about it very differently. And the quote is from Glinda the Good Witch from The Wizard of Oz, who said, "You've always had the power, my dear. You just had to learn it for yourself." And I used to just think that meant, Dorothy, all you had to do was tap your heels 3 times and say, "There's no place like home." But that isn't what she's saying. She's saying that each of us has the power. We just don't know it. And once we know it, then the sky's the limit.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for being.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.